The tray shook in Elena Cross's hands the moment the door of the diner slammed open, and 6 men in black coats walked in like they owned the ground under their boots. She steadied herself fast, the way she always did, and carried 3 plates of food to a corner table without spilling a drop. But her eyes had already caught the man at the front of the group, tall, broad-shouldered, with a calm and dangerous look that made the whole room go quiet, without him saying a single word. She did not know his name yet. She only knew that everyone in the diner suddenly sat straighter, and that the old cook in the kitchen, Henry, dropped a spoon and did not bother picking it up. The tall man took the booth near the window. 5 others sat around him, but one man stood out from the rest, walking a step ahead of everyone, chin lifted, eyes sharp with something close to cruelty. He wore a leather jacket that looked far too expensive for a small-town diner, and he looked at the menu like it had personally offended him. Elena walked over, notepad in hand, forcing a polite smile onto her face. It was a smile she had practiced for years, the kind that hid everything underneath it. "Welcome," she said. "Can I get you started with drinks?" The man in the leather jacket looked up at her slowly, his eyes moving from her worn shoes to her stained apron, to her tired face, like he was reading a price tag on something cheap. Well, he said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "Look what we have here, a waitress in a town with more cows than people." A few of his men laughed. The tall, quiet man beside him did not. His eyes stayed on Elena, steady, unreadable. "Just water for me," the man continued, smirking. "I don't trust anything a woman who smells like fried onions could bring me." Elena felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her voice even. "Of course. I'll bring menus for the rest of the table." "Careful," he said, leaning back with a grin that showed too many teeth. "Don't trip on your own shoes, sweetheart. I hear waitresses like you aren't known for balance, only for spilling things and making excuses." The words landed like small stones thrown one after another. A woman at a nearby table lowered her eyes in embarrassment for Elena. A young couple near the counter stopped eating to watch. Elena felt every gaze in the room settle on her, waiting to see if she would crumble. She did not crumble. She simply nodded, turned, and walked toward the kitchen with her spine straight, though her fingers curled tightly around the edge of her notepad. Behind the counter, Lucy Bennett, the only other waitress on shift that night, grabbed Elena's arm. "Who are these people?" she whispered. "I've never seen them before. I don't know," Elena said quietly. "But whoever they are, they think they're important." "They might be," Lucy said, glancing nervously toward the group. "Look at how everyone's acting. Even old Henry looks nervous, and nothing scares that man." Elena did not answer. She filled a glass with water, added ice, and walked back out with her chin high. The man in the leather jacket, whose name she would later learn was Marcus, continued his cruel jokes the entire time she served the table. He mocked her uniform, calling it something a child would wear to play dress-up. He mocked the way she wrote down the order, saying her handwriting looked like a chicken had walked across the page. Each insult was delivered with a smile, as if humiliating her in front of a room full of strangers was nothing more than a fun game to pass the time. Through it all, the tall, quiet man, the one who seemed to command silent respect from everyone around him, said nothing. He watched Elena with a stillness that unsettled her more than Marcus's insults did. His eyes did not mock her. They studied her, the way someone studies a puzzle that does not quite fit the picture on the box. When Elena brought their food, Marcus knocked his fork off the table on purpose and demanded a new one, snapping his fingers like she was nothing more than a servant, meant to jump at his command. She picked up the fork without a word, cleaned the area, and brought him a fresh one. "Guess that's the only thing you're actually good at," Marcus said, laughing, picking things up off the floor. The room went silent again. Even his own men shifted uncomfortably, as though sensing he had crossed some invisible line. Elena's jaw tightened for just a second, so brief that only someone watching closely would have caught it. The tall, quiet man caught it. He leaned forward slightly, studying the flicker in her eyes, a flicker that did not belong to a simple, tired waitress. It was gone as fast as it appeared, replaced by the same practiced calm. "Enjoy your meal," Elena said, her voice steady, and walked away. She spent the rest of the night serving other tables, refilling coffee cups, and clearing plates, doing her best to push the humiliation to the back of her mind. But she could feel Marcus's group still there, could hear his loud voice occasionally rise above the quiet hum of the diner. telling another joke at her expense to anyone nearby who would listen. When they finally stood to leave, Marcus tossed a few crumpled bills onto the table, far less than what the bill required. "That's more than you're worth," he said, walking past Elena with a grin. "Try not to trip on your way to pick that up." His men laughed again, following him out the door. The tall, quiet man was the last to rise. He paused beside Elena, close enough that she could feel the strange, quiet pressure of his presence, like standing near something far more powerful than it appeared. "You handled that well," he said, his voice low, almost thoughtful. "Better than most people would have." Elena looked up at him, surprised by the words. "It's just part of the job," she said carefully. He studied her for a moment longer, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if trying to solve something. Then he nodded once, and walked out, without another word, leaving Elena standing there, her heart beating a little faster than she wanted to admit. The diner slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Lucy rushed over the second the door closed behind the group. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I can't believe he spoke to you like that. Who do these people think they are?" "I'm fine," Elena said, though her hands were not quite steady as she began clearing the table. "People like that don't matter." "You sure? You look upset." "I'm not upset," Elena said, a little too quickly. "I'm used to it." But she was not fine, not entirely. As she cleaned the table where Marcus had sat, gathering the crumpled bills and empty cups, something cold and sharp moved through her chest, something she had worked hard for years to bury. It was not sadness. It was something closer to old anger waking up after a long sleep. She finished her shift in silence, her mind replaying the scene over and over, not out of hurt, but out of memory. Marcus's mocking voice reminded her of other voices from long ago, voices that had once tried to tell her she was small, powerless, someone to be overlooked and dismissed. She had proven those voices wrong once before, a long time ago, in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. She had been trained to survive, far worse than cruel words in a diner. She had learned to move quickly, to think faster than danger, to disappear into ordinary life so completely that no one would ever suspect what she was capable of. That life was supposed to be over. She had built a new one here, in this small town, with its slow mornings and simple routines. She had wanted peace. She had wanted to be forgotten. But as she locked up the diner that night, stepping out into the cool evening air, she felt the old instincts stir beneath her skin, quiet but unmistakable, like a blade being slowly unsheathed after years in its case. She walked to her car in the empty parking lot, her footsteps steady on the gravel. The night was dark, the streetlights casting long shadows across the lot. She paused beside her car, glancing back at the diner's glowing sign, and allowed herself one slow breath. For a brief moment, alone in the dark, she let her guard down completely. Her eyes sharpened, her posture shifted, and something dangerous flickered across her face. Something no one in the diner had ever seen, something that did not belong to a tired waitress at all. Then, just as quickly, she pulled the mask back into place, opened her car door, and drove home through the quiet streets, unaware that from a distance, hidden in the shadows across the road, someone had been watching her the entire time. Someone who had seen exactly what flickered in her eyes when she thought no one was looking. That someone did not move. They simply watched her taillights disappear into the night, already forming plans of their own, plans that would change everything by the time the sun rose the next morning. Marcus woke up the next morning in the guest wing of the Blackthorn estate, with a pounding headache and a phone buzzing angrily on the nightstand. He groaned, rubbed his eyes, and reached for it, expecting another message from one of his men about pack business. Instead, the screen showed a number he did not recognize, and a message that made him sit up straight in bed. The message read only a handful of words. "Come alone, Beta, noon. The old rail yard past Miller's Creek. No warriors, no tricks." Marcus read it 3 times, his headache forgotten. He was the Beta of the Blackthorn pack, second only to Alpha King Damian Blackthorn himself. No one sent him commands. No one dared. He almost deleted the message right there, certain it was some kind of prank from a rival pack trying to rattle him. But something about the tone, the confidence behind those few short words, made his stomach twist in a way he did not like. He had felt that same twist once before, years ago, right before an ambush that had nearly cost him his life. He dressed quickly and walked down to the main hall, where breakfast was already laid out. Damien sat at the head of the long table, sorting through a stack of papers with the focused calm that defined him. Across from him sat Oliver, one of the senior warriors, and Chloe, the pack's sharp-eyed advisor, who managed most of the territory's daily affairs. "You look like something crawled into your bed and died there," Oliver said, smirking, as Marcus dropped into a chair. "Rough morning," Marcus muttered, pouring himself coffee with more force than necessary. Damien glanced up from his papers, his eyes settling briefly on Marcus before returning to the documents. "You were loud again last night," he said, his tone flat, neither approving nor scolding. "The waitress at that diner." Marcus waved a hand dismissively. "Just having some fun, no harm done." "She didn't seem to think it was fun," Damien said quietly. Marcus rolled his eyes. "She's a waitress in a nowhere town, Damien. She'll forget about it by tomorrow. People like her always do." Damien said nothing, but something in his expression shifted, thoughtful and distant, as though he were replaying a memory Marcus wasn't part of. He had noticed something in the girl's eyes the night before, something that did not match the fear or humiliation he expected to see. It had bothered him enough that he had barely slept. Marcus finished his coffee and stood, patting down his jacket. "I have somewhere to be," he said. "Personal matter." Chloe looked up curiously. "What kind of personal matter?" "None of your business," Marcus said, though there was an edge of nervousness beneath his usual arrogance that Chloe caught immediately. She exchanged a glance with Oliver, who simply shrugged. Marcus left the estate an hour later, still telling himself the message meant nothing. Still, some old instinct made him bring two of his warriors along, Nathan and Peter, both broad-shouldered enforcers who had fought beside him for years. He told himself it was simply caution, nothing more. The drive to the old rail yard took nearly 40 minutes, winding through quiet roads that grew emptier the further they went. The rail yard itself had been abandoned for over a decade, its rusted train cars sitting silent under a gray sky, weeds crawling up through cracked concrete. Marcus stepped out of the car first, scanning the empty yard with a frown. "This is ridiculous," he said. "There's no one here." "Maybe it was a prank after all," Nathan said, glancing around. Peter said nothing, his eyes narrowing as he studied the shadows between the rusted train cars. Something about the stillness of the place felt wrong to him, though he couldn't quite explain why. They waited nearly 10 minutes in silence, Marcus growing more irritated by the second. He was reaching for his phone to call Damien and report the whole thing as a waste of time, when a voice spoke from somewhere behind them, calm and clear. "You brought company," the voice said. "I asked you to come alone." Marcus spun around, his warriors instantly shifting into defensive positions beside him. Standing near the entrance of one of the old train cars was a figure dressed in dark, simple clothing. Hood pulled low enough to hide most of her face, but there was no mistaking the voice, or the calm way she stood, weight balanced evenly, hands loose at her sides. It took Marcus a long moment to place her. When he finally did, disbelief crossed his face, quickly replaced by mockery. "You," he said, laughing in surprise. "The waitress? You're the one who sent that message?" Elena pulled back her hood, revealing her face fully in the pale morning light. Her expression held none of the nervous politeness she had shown the night before. Instead, there was only quiet, unshakable calm. "I told you to come alone," she repeated. Marcus's laughter grew louder, though it had a nervous edge to it now that he refused to acknowledge. "This is a joke, right? You dragged me all the way out here to what? Apologize on my behalf? Beg for a tip?" "No," Elena said simply. "I brought you here because you need to understand something before this goes any further." Nathan stepped forward, his voice hard. "Watch your tone. You're speaking to the beta of the Blackthorn pack." Elena's eyes flicked to him briefly, unimpressed. "I know exactly who he is," she said. "That's precisely why I'm here." Marcus's amusement faded slightly, replaced by irritation. "Enough games. What do you want? Money? An apology? Say it plainly." Elena tilted her head slightly, studying him the way someone studies an opponent they've already decided how to defeat. "I want you to understand that the way you treat people has consequences," she said. "Even people you assume are beneath you." Marcus scoffed. "Consequences? From a waitress? From someone you underestimated," Elena said quietly. Peter's instincts, sharper than his companions, prickled at the edges of unease. He studied the way Elena stood, the balance in her stance, the stillness in her hands. and something about it reminded him uncomfortably of trained fighters he had faced in the past. Fighters who had nearly ended his life more than once. "Marcus," he said slowly, "maybe we should go." Marcus ignored him, stepping closer to Elena, his confidence overriding whatever caution his warrior might have felt. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice dropping into something colder, more threatening. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you don't get to summon me anywhere. You don't get to speak to me like an equal. You're going to apologize for wasting my time, and then you're going to disappear back into whatever hole you crawled out of." Elena's expression did not change. If anything, it grew calmer, more focused, the way still water grows more dangerous the deeper it runs. "I gave you a chance," she said softly, almost regretfully. "I hoped you would listen." "Listen to what?" Marcus snapped, his patience gone. "To reason," Elena said. "Since you won't, I suppose you'll have to learn a different way." Nathan let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Are you threatening us? Do you have any idea what we are?" "I know exactly what you are," Elena said, her voice steady, almost gentle. "The question is whether you know what I am." For a moment, silence stretched across the rail yard, broken only by the distant sound of wind moving through rusted metal. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, some cutting remark ready on his tongue, but something in Elena's stillness stopped him. It was the same flicker he had barely noticed the night before at the diner, the flicker that Damien had caught and could not stop thinking about. Only now, standing in the open, unguarded by tables or trays or the pretense of politeness, that flicker was no longer hidden at all. It sat plainly in her eyes, calm and certain, the look of someone who had faced far greater dangers than 3 overconfident wolves in an empty rail yard. Marcus felt the first real thread of unease work its way through his chest. He glanced at Nathan and Peter, both of whom had gone quiet, sensing the same shift in the air that he did. "This is your last chance to walk away," Elena said quietly. "I won't offer it again." Marcus's pride, wounded and stubborn, refused to let him back down in front of his own men. He straightened his shoulders, forcing confidence back into his voice, even as doubt curled cold in his stomach. "Walk away?" he said, laughing without humor. "You're outnumbered 3-1, standing alone in an empty yard, and you're telling us to walk away?" Elena's lips curved into the faintest, calmest smile Marcus had ever seen, one that did not belong to fear at all. "I'm not the one who should be worried about numbers," she said. And with those words, the tension in the rail yard snapped taut, like a wire pulled to its very limit, ready to break at the smallest movement. Nathan's hand twitched toward his side. Peter shifted his weight, preparing. Marcus's jaw tightened, pride and instinct warring inside him. None of them moved yet, but all 3 of them understood, in that final quiet second before everything changed, that they had walked into something far more dangerous than a simple confrontation with an ordinary waitress. Somewhere far above them, unseen, a hawk circled once over the rail yard before disappearing into the pale morning sky, as though even nature itself understood that something significant was about to happen below. Nathan moved first, lunging toward Elena with the speed only a trained wolf could manage, his confidence built on years of victories against ordinary humans who never stood a chance. But Elena was not where he expected her to be. She sidestepped smoothly, her movement so calm it almost looked unhurried, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling past her, off balance, arms flailing for something solid to catch. He caught nothing but air before landing hard against a rusted train car, the metal groaning under the impact. He shook his head, dazed, disbelief written across his face, as he realized he had missed her completely. Peter did not hesitate to follow, more cautious than Nathan but no less determined. He circled slightly, testing her, throwing a quick strike toward her side. Elena blocked it with practiced ease, her arm angled precisely enough to redirect the force without absorbing any real impact herself. She used the same motion to sweep his leg out from under him, and Peter hit the ground with a heavy thud, his breath knocked from his lungs. Marcus stood frozen for half a second, watching his 2 strongest warriors fail to land a single hit on a woman he had mocked as beneath his notice only hours before. Anger flooded through him, chasing away the last of his disbelief, and he charged forward himself, faster and stronger than either of his men, fueled by wounded pride. Elena turned to face him fully now, her expression calm, almost patient, like a teacher waiting for a student to understand a lesson they had been resisting. He swung toward her with controlled force, testing her defenses the way an experienced fighter would. rather than throwing wild strikes like his men had. Elena met his effort with equal precision, blocking and redirecting, refusing to be pushed backward even an inch. Their exchange moved fast, controlled, more like a demonstration of skill than an uncontrolled scuffle, each movement deliberate, measured, purposeful. Marcus was strong, faster than most humans could ever hope to be, but Elena matched him step for step, her movements economical, wasting no energy, no motion without purpose. When he overextended, reaching too far in his frustration, she used the opening to guide him past her, off balance just enough that his own momentum carried him down onto one knee. He knelt there for a moment, breathing hard, staring up at her in stunned silence. The mockery, the confidence, the easy cruelty from the night before had all drained completely from his face, replaced now by something closer to disbelief, mixed with the beginning of real respect he did not want to admit to. "How?" he managed, his voice quieter than Elena had ever heard it. "How is this possible?" Elena stepped back slightly, giving him room to stand. No triumph in her expression, only quiet steadiness. "You assumed a uniform and an apron meant weakness," she said. "You assumed a smile meant surrender." Nathan pushed himself up from where he had fallen, wincing as he rubbed his shoulder. Peter remained seated on the ground, staring at Elena, with wide, wary eyes, all bravado gone. "You're not just a waitress," Marcus said slowly, still kneeling. "No," Elena agreed. "I'm not." He rose to his feet finally, unsteady, studying her with new eyes now, eyes that no longer held mockery, but something closer to caution, even a flicker of fear he refused to name out loud. "Who trained you?" he asked. "Where does someone learn to move like that?" Elena's expression grew distant for a moment, as though a door, somewhere deep inside her, had opened briefly onto memories she rarely allowed herself to revisit. "Somewhere far from here," she said quietly. "Somewhere that no longer exists." Marcus opened his mouth to press further, but something in her tone told him this was not a subject she intended to explain. Not now, not to him. He closed his mouth instead, glancing at his men, both of whom were slowly getting to their feet, moving carefully, clearly rattled by an encounter neither of them had expected to lose. "This doesn't leave this yard," Marcus said suddenly, straightening his jacket, in an attempt to recover some fragment of his usual composure. "Understood? None of this happened." Elena studied him for a long moment before answering. "That depends entirely on you," she said. "If you treat people the way you treated me last night, expect consequences you cannot predict. If you learn from this instead, then perhaps we never need to speak again." Marcus's jaw tightened, pride warring with the very real fear now settling into his chest. He was not used to feeling powerless, and the sensation sat uncomfortably beneath his skin, gnawing at the edges of everything he believed about his own strength. "You could have really hurt us," he said slowly, almost accusingly, as though searching for some explanation that would make sense of what had just happened. "I could have," Elena agreed simply. "I chose not to." The words landed heavier than any physical blow could have. Marcus stared at her, understanding slowly dawning that the entire encounter had been controlled from the very first movement, that she had never once been in real danger, that every choice in that rail yard had belonged entirely to her. He turned without another word, gesturing sharply for Nathan and Peter to follow. They climbed into the car in tense, uneasy silence, none of them speaking, as they pulled away from the rail yard, leaving Elena standing alone amid the rusted train cars, the wind moving softly through her hair. She remained there a while longer after they left, staring out across the quiet, empty yard, her expression unreadable. She had not wanted this. She had built a careful, quiet life, specifically to avoid moments like this one. Moments that reminded her too clearly of who she used to be, of the training that never truly left the body once it had been carved so deeply into muscle and memory. She thought of Grace, the diner owner who had given her a chance when she arrived in town with nothing but a small bag and a false name. She thought of Lucy, who had become something close to a real friend over the past year, someone who knew nothing about the life Elena had left behind. She thought of the slow, simple mornings she had grown to treasure, the quiet routine that had, for the first time in years, felt something like peace. All of that suddenly felt fragile, threatened by a single confrontation she had never wanted but could not avoid. She walked back to her own car eventually, parked a short distance away, and drove back toward town with the windows down, letting the cool air clear her thoughts. She told herself it was over now, that Marcus would keep his silence out of pride if nothing else, that this strange chapter would close quietly and leave her ordinary life undisturbed. She did not yet know that word travels fast within a pack, especially when that word concerns the beta's pride being shattered by someone the entire territory would soon be whispering about. She did not know that Nathan, still shaken and unable to keep silent about what he had witnessed, would mention the encounter to a fellow warrior before the sun had even set that day. She did not know that whispers would move through the pack like wildfire, reaching ears far more powerful and far more curious than Marcus would have liked. By the time Elena arrived home that afternoon, changing back into her uniform for another shift at the diner, the Alpha King himself had already heard fragments of what happened at the old rail yard, and unlike his beta, Damien Blackthorne was not interested in silence. He was interested in answers. Damien sat in his study that evening, the fire crackling low in the hearth, listening as Chloe relayed what she had gathered from 3 separate sources within the pack. Each version of the story differed slightly in detail, but the core remained the same. Marcus, along with 2 of his strongest warriors, had been outmatched entirely by a single woman in an abandoned rail yard, a woman none of them could properly explain the strength of. Nathan wouldn't stop talking about it, Chloe said, pacing slowly in front of the fire. Said she moved like she already knew what he was going to do before he did it. Said Peter went down without landing a single strike. Damien remained quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the flickering flames. And Marcus, he said finally. What does he say? Nothing, Chloe replied. He's locked himself in his room since he got back. Won't speak to anyone. That silence told Damien more than any detailed report could have. Marcus was proud, sometimes recklessly so, but he was never quiet, especially not after a confrontation. His silence now spoke of humiliation deep enough to shake something fundamental in him. Damien thought back to the diner, to the woman who had carried plates with steady hands, while Marcus mocked her without mercy, to the brief flicker he had caught in her eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. He had dismissed it at the time as simple restrained anger, the kind any person might feel when insulted publicly. Now he understood, it had been something else entirely. Find out everything you can about her, Damien said quietly. Her name, where she came from, anything unusual in her past. Chloe nodded and left the study, already reaching for her phone. It took less than 2 hours for Chloe to return, her expression troubled as she laid a thin folder on Damien's desk. This is strange, she said. Her name is Elena Cross, according to town records. She's worked at the diner for a little over a year. Before that, almost nothing. No previous address that checks out, no family listed, no consistent employment history before she arrived here. Damien opened the folder, scanning the sparse details inside. A ghost, he murmured. Exactly, Chloe said. Someone built this identity carefully, but not perfectly. There are gaps, small inconsistencies, the kind you'd only notice if you were looking for them specifically. Damien closed the folder, leaning back in his chair, his mind turning over the pieces slowly. He had encountered fabricated identities before, mostly among wolves fleeing dangerous pasts or hiding from rival packs. But something about this felt different, more precise, more deliberate. There's something else, Chloe added carefully. I reached out to an old contact who tracks unusual activity across territories. He mentioned a name in passing, something called the Hunters Guild. Said it was an organization thought to be destroyed years ago, trained specifically to eliminate rogue wolves who threatened human communities. Damien's expression sharpened at the words. He had heard whispers of the Hunters Guild long ago, stories told more like legend than fact, of humans trained from a young age to move faster, strike harder, and think sharper than any ordinary person should be capable of. Most in the wolf world assumed the organization had been wiped out entirely after a conflict decades ago, its members scattered or killed. You think she's connected to them? Damien said slowly. I think it's possible, Chloe said. The way she fought, according to Nathan's description, doesn't match anything typical. It matches training methods rumored to belong to the guild. Damien sat in silence for a long moment, processing the implications. If Elena truly had connections to an organization built specifically to hunt and eliminate wolves, her presence in his territory represented a threat far greater than a simple confrontation with his beta. Yet something about her behavior did not align neatly with that theory either. She had not attacked first. She had given Marcus every opportunity to walk away. She had shown restraint, even when she clearly held the advantage. That restraint intrigued him more than anything else in Chloe's report. "I want to speak with her myself," Damien said finally. Chloe hesitated. "Directly. That could escalate things further if she feels threatened." "I won't threaten her," Damien said. "I only want answers." The next morning, Damien arrived at the diner alone, dressed simply, without the entourage that typically surrounded him. He wanted no repeat of the tension from before, no audience to complicate an already delicate situation. He took a seat near the window, the same booth Marcus had claimed days earlier, and waited. Elena noticed him the moment he walked in, recognition flashing briefly across her face, before she masked it with practiced calm. She approached his table slowly, notepad in hand, her expression carefully neutral. "Good morning," she said. "What can I get you?" "Coffee," Damien said, "and a few minutes of your time, if you can spare it." Elena's eyes flickered toward him, sharp and assessing. "I'm working," she said carefully. "I know," Damien said. "I'll wait until your break." She studied him a moment longer, weighing something behind her calm expression, before nodding once and walking away to fill his order. Damien watched her move through the diner, noting the same fluid grace Chloe's report had described. Movements too precise, too controlled for someone with no formal training. When her break finally came nearly an hour later, Elena approached his table again, sliding into the seat across from him, without waiting for an invitation. "You're not here about coffee," she said flatly. "No," Damien admitted. "I'm here about yesterday morning." Elena's expression did not change, though something in her posture grew slightly more guarded. "I don't know what you're referring to." "My beta came home shaken and silent," Damien said calmly. "Two of my warriors won't stop talking about a woman who defeated all three of them without breaking a sweat." "I think you know exactly what I'm referring to." Elena held his gaze steadily, neither confirming nor denying anything. "Your beta insulted me publicly," she said instead, "in front of an entire diner full of people. I asked him to meet me privately to discuss it. That's all." "That's not all," Damien said quietly. "And we both know it." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the quiet hum of the diner around them. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice low, careful. "What is it you want from me?" "Answers," Damien said simply. "I'm not here to threaten you or expose you. I only want to understand what I'm dealing with." Elena studied him for a long moment, searching his expression for any sign of deception, any hint of the cruelty his beta had shown so freely. She found none. Instead, she found something closer to genuine curiosity, tempered by caution. "I'm not what you think I am," she said finally. "Then tell me what you are," Damien said. Elena hesitated, old instincts warring with something newer, something that had grown slowly over the past year of quiet, ordinary life. She had built walls around her past for good reason, walls she had never intended to lower for anyone, especially not an alpha king with the power to destroy the fragile peace she had found. "I'm someone who wants to be left alone," she said finally. "That's all you need to know." Damien nodded slowly, accepting the answer for now, though the questions in his mind only multiplied. He rose from the booth, leaving payment for the coffee on the table, more than enough to cover the bill several times over. "For what it's worth," he said, pausing beside her, "my beta will not bother you again." Elena watched him walk toward the door, her expression unreadable. She did not know yet that this brief conversation marked only the beginning of something far larger, something that would eventually pull her back into a world she had worked so hard to leave behind. Outside, Damien paused beside his car, glancing back once toward the diner's glowing windows. Whatever Elena Cross truly was, wherever she had come from, one thing had become undeniably clear to him. She was not simply a waitress who had gotten lucky in a moment of confrontation. She was something far more significant, hiding in plain sight within his own territory, and he intended to understand exactly what that meant before anyone else discovered her secret first. 3 days passed quietly after Damien's visit to the diner, and Elena allowed herself to believe, cautiously, that the situation had settled. Marcus had not returned. No warriors had come looking for her. Life resumed its familiar rhythm, and she found comfort in the small routines that had once brought her peace. The early morning walks before her shift, the quiet conversations with Lucy over shared coffee breaks, the simple satisfaction of an ordinary day passing without incident. But peace, she had learned long ago, rarely lasted as long as one hoped. On the fourth evening, as Elena locked up the diner after closing, a car she did not recognize pulled slowly into the parking lot, headlights cutting through the darkness. She tensed immediately, old instincts sharpening beneath her calm exterior, as she watched the vehicle come to a stop a short distance away. A man stepped out, dressed plainly, unremarkable in every visible way, except for the careful, deliberate manner in which he moved, scanning his surroundings before approaching her directly. Elena recognized that manner instantly. It was the same discipline she carried within herself, the same trained awareness that marked someone who had once belonged to the guild. "Elena Cross," the man said, his voice calm, almost respectful. Or should I say, Elena Ward. It's been a long time. Elena's expression remained carefully neutral, though her pulse quickened at the sound of her true name, a name she had not heard spoken aloud in over a year. "You have the wrong person," she said evenly. The man smiled thinly. "We both know that isn't true. My name is Adam Reeves. I served with you, briefly, before everything fell apart." Elena studied him closely now, searching old memories for recognition. Slowly, pieces clicked into place. A face from training grounds long since destroyed, a voice she vaguely remembered from missions, carried out in silence and shadow. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "Answers, mostly," Adam said. "There are people looking for survivors of the guild. Some want to rebuild what was lost. Others want to eliminate anyone who might expose what happened before it was destroyed." Elena's jaw tightened. "The guild is gone," she said. "It should stay that way." "Not everyone agrees," Adam said. "There's a faction forming, calling itself the Remnant. They believe the original mission was abandoned too soon, that wolves across every territory need to be controlled, eliminated if necessary. They're recruiting former guild members, forcing those who refuse." "And you're here to recruit me," Elena said flatly. "I'm here to warn you," Adam said, his expression growing serious. "They know you're alive. They know roughly where you are. It's only a matter of time before they find you directly, and when they do, they won't offer the same courtesy I'm offering now." Elena felt a cold weight settle in her chest, the careful peace she had built over the past year, beginning to crack under the pressure of old dangers resurfacing. "Why warn me at all?" she asked. "We were never close." "Because I don't believe in what they're doing," Adam said quietly. "I left the guild's ideals behind long ago, same as you did. I don't want to see you dragged back into something neither of us chose to be part of anymore." Elena studied him carefully, weighing the sincerity in his expression against years of training that had taught her to trust almost no one. "How much time do I have?" she asked finally. "Days? Maybe less," Adam said. "They've already traced fragments of your identity. It's only a matter of time before they connect the pieces completely." Elena closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the weight of his warning. "Why here?" she murmured. "Why now, after everything?" "Word travels," Adam said simply. "Apparently, you made quite an impression recently, defeating 3 wolves without much effort. That kind of skill doesn't go unnoticed, not in circles that are actively searching for exactly that kind of skill." Elena's stomach twisted at the realization. Her confrontation with Marcus, meant only to teach a lesson about cruelty and consequence, had inadvertently exposed her hidden abilities to precisely the people she had spent years avoiding. Adam nodded, stepping back toward his car. "Don't take too long," he said. "And Elena, be careful who you trust. The wolves here, especially their Alpha King, might seem harmless enough now, but alliances shift quickly when survival is at stake." He drove off into the darkness, leaving Elena standing alone in the empty parking lot, her mind racing through possibilities she had hoped never to face again. She did not sleep well that night, memories she had buried deep resurfacing with painful clarity. She remembered the training grounds, harsh and unforgiving, where children were shaped into weapons before they fully understood what that meant. She remembered the mission that had ended everything, the compound destroyed in a single devastating night, fire and chaos swallowing everyone she had once called family. She remembered running, alone, carrying nothing but the clothes on her back, and a training so deeply ingrained, it had become part of her very bones. She remembered building a new identity from nothing, choosing a quiet town far from anything familiar, hoping distance alone would be enough to keep her safe. It had worked for a while. Now, that fragile safety felt like it was crumbling entirely. The next morning, Elena arrived at the diner exhausted, dark circles beneath her eyes betraying the sleepless night behind her. Lucy noticed immediately, concern etched across her face. "You look terrible," Lucy said bluntly. "Is everything okay?" "Just tired," Elena said, forcing a small smile. "Rough night." Lucy studied her a moment longer, clearly unconvinced, but she let the matter drop, sensing Elena wasn't ready to share whatever was truly bothering her. Later that afternoon, as Elena wiped down tables during a quiet lull, the diner door opened once more, and Damien Blackthorne walked in alone again, his expression unusually serious. Elena felt her stomach tighten at the sight of him, uncertain whether his presence meant further complications or, perhaps, an unexpected opportunity. He approached her directly this time, without waiting to be seated. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Somewhere private." Elena studied him carefully, weighing Adam's warning against the calm sincerity she had sensed from Damien during their previous conversation. Trust, she knew, was a dangerous thing to extend carelessly. Yet something told her that facing what was coming entirely alone would be far more dangerous still. "Give me 10 minutes, she said finally. Damien nodded, taking a seat near the window to wait, his eyes following her movements with quiet, patient attention as she finished her tasks. Neither of them spoke of it directly yet, but both understood, in the tense silence between them, that whatever conversation was about to unfold would change the careful balance they had maintained until now, pulling them both toward a future neither had anticipated, only days before. Elena led Damien to a small office at the back of the diner, one Grace let her use occasionally for paperwork or quiet breaks. It was a cramped space, filled with stacked boxes and an old wooden desk, but it offered privacy the main floor could not. She closed the door behind them, leaning against it for a moment, before facing him fully. "You said you wanted answers," she said. "Ask your questions." Damien studied her carefully, choosing his words with unusual care. "I know about the Hunters Guild," he said. "I know it was destroyed years ago. I believe you were part of it." Elena's expression remained steady, though something behind her eyes flickered briefly, acknowledgement she could not fully hide. "How do you know that name?" she asked quietly. "My advisor has contacts who track unusual movements across territories," Damien said. "The way you fought, according to my Beta's warriors, matched rumors of training methods attributed to the guild." Elena exhaled slowly, some of the tension in her shoulders easing slightly, as though a weight she had carried alone for a long time had finally found somewhere else to rest, even briefly. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "I was part of it, once." "What happened to it?" Damien asked. "It was destroyed," Elena said, her voice growing distant. "An internal conflict, disagreements about methods, about who deserved to be targeted. Some believed the guild should only act against wolves, who genuinely threatened human communities. Others believed every wolf, regardless of behavior, represented a threat that needed to be eliminated entirely. That disagreement turned violent one night, and the compound burned. I was the only survivor I know of, until recently." "Recently," Damien repeated carefully. Elena hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. She had come this far already. Retreating into silence now seemed pointless. "A man came to see me last night," she said finally. "Someone I once served alongside. He told me a faction calling themselves the Remnant is reforming, made up of former guild members who believe the original mission wasn't finished. They intend to target wolves indiscriminately, and they're actively searching for survivors like me to either recruit or eliminate." Damien's expression darkened at the news, understanding immediately the scale of the threat such a group could represent. "Do you know how many members this remnant has?" he asked. "No," Elena admitted. "Only that they're organized enough to trace fragments of my identity within days of my confrontation with your Beta." Damien was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications carefully. If a group of trained hunters intended to target wolves across multiple territories, the threat extended far beyond his own pack, potentially endangering countless innocent lives, wolf and human alike. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked finally. "You could have kept this hidden, disappeared before they found you." Elena met his gaze steadily. "Because running hasn't worked before," she said. "And because, whether I like it or not, staying here means what happens to your pack now affects me directly too." Damien studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression, respect mixing with the careful calculation of someone accustomed to weighing threats and alliances. "I want to offer you protection," he said finally. "In exchange, I would ask for your expertise, should this remnant prove as dangerous as you fear." Elena's instincts immediately bristled at the suggestion. Years of training, warning her against binding herself too closely to any pack, wolf or otherwise. "I work alone," she said carefully. "That's how I've survived this long." "Working alone hasn't kept the remnant from finding you," Damien pointed out gently. "Perhaps it's time to consider a different approach." Elena crossed her arms, considering his words carefully. She thought of Adam's warning about trusting wolves too easily, about alliances shifting when survival was at stake. Yet she also recognized the truth in Damien's observation. Isolation, however carefully maintained, had not been enough to keep her hidden indefinitely. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked finally. "Protection within my territory," Damien said. "Resources, information, and warriors if necessary, in exchange for your knowledge of the guild's methods and tactics. If the remnant intends to target wolves broadly, understanding how they operate could prove invaluable in defending against them." Elena studied him carefully, searching for hidden motives behind his offer. She found none obvious, though she remained cautious, unwilling to lower her guard entirely so quickly. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Take the time you need," Damien said, rising to leave. "But don't take too long. If the remnant is as organized as your contact suggests, time may be a luxury none of us have." He left the small office quietly, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts once more. She sat down slowly at the cluttered desk, resting her head in her hands, exhaustion and uncertainty pressing heavily upon her. For over a year, she had built a life defined by careful distance, by avoiding entanglements that might expose her past, or endanger the fragile peace she had constructed. Now, circumstances beyond her control were pushing her directly toward the very kind of alliance she had worked so hard to avoid. Yet as she considered Damien's offer more carefully, she found herself weighing not just the practical benefits of protection and resources, but something else entirely, a cautious curiosity about the Alpha King himself. He had shown restraint she had not expected, patience and respect, rather than the arrogance she associated with wolves in positions of power. He had listened rather than dismissed, questioned rather than assumed. It was not trust, not yet, but it was, perhaps, the beginning of something that might eventually grow into trust, given enough time and enough reason to believe it justified. Later that evening, as Elena finished her shift and walked toward her car beneath the darkening sky, she noticed a car parked at the edge of the lot, engine idling quietly. She approached cautiously, recognizing Adam Reeves behind the wheel, his expression grim. "They've made contact," he said without preamble, rolling down his window. "The remnant knows exactly where you are now. They intend to move within days." Elena felt her chest tighten at the news, urgency replacing the cautious deliberation she had allowed herself only hours before. "How many?" she asked. "Enough," Adam said grimly. "You need to decide quickly whose side you're standing on, Elena, because very soon, standing alone won't be an option anymore." He drove away without waiting for a response, leaving Elena standing once again in the quiet parking lot, the weight of an impossible decision settling heavily upon her shoulders. She thought of Damien's offer, of the fragile trust beginning to form between them, and understood, with sudden clarity, that the time for careful deliberation had run out entirely. She needed to choose, and she needed to choose now. Elena arrived at the Blackthorn estate early the next morning, her decision made after a long, sleepless night of careful consideration. She carried only a small bag with her, the same one she had used to build her identity in this town over a year ago, a habit born from years of needing to leave places quickly, without warning. Chloe greeted her at the entrance, studying her with open curiosity rather than hostility. "Damien said you might be joining us," she said. "I have to admit, I wasn't sure you'd actually come." "Neither was I," Elena admitted quietly. Chloe led her through the estate, a large but understated building that reflected Damien's practical nature rather than excessive displays of wealth. Warriors moved through the halls with quiet purpose, glancing curiously at Elena as she passed. Word of her confrontation with Marcus clearly having spread throughout the entire pack by now. Damien met them in a large study, lined with maps and documents, detailing pack territories. He looked up as Elena entered, something like relief briefly crossing his expression, before settling back into careful composure. "I have conditions," Elena replied. "I'll share what I know about the guild's methods, and help however I can against the remnant. But I won't be commanded like one of your warriors. I make my own decisions." "Agreed," Damien said without hesitation. "Your knowledge is valuable precisely because of the perspective you bring. I have no interest in controlling that." Elena nodded, some of the tension in her shoulders easing slightly at his easy agreement. She glanced around the study, noting the detailed maps marking territory boundaries and patrol routes. "Tell me what you know about the remnant so far," she said. Damien gestured for her to sit, spreading additional documents across the desk between them. "Limited information currently," he admitted. "We know they're recruiting former guild members, some willingly, others through coercion. We believe their numbers are growing steadily, though we don't yet know their exact size or the full scope of their intentions. They'll move carefully at first," Elena said, studying the maps thoughtfully. "Guild tactics emphasize patience, observation before action. They'll likely watch your territory extensively before attempting anything direct." "How long does that typically take?" Damien asked. "Depends on their resources," Elena said. "Weeks, sometimes months, if done properly. But if they're already aware of my location and moving quickly, they may abandon patience in favor of speed, especially if they believe delay gives us time to prepare defenses." Damien absorbed this information carefully, already forming strategies in his mind. "What weaknesses does the guild's training typically leave unaddressed?" he asked. "If we understand their methods, we can better anticipate their approach." Elena considered the question seriously, drawing on years of training she had tried hard to forget. "Guild members are taught precision and control above all else," she said. "They rarely act impulsively, which makes them predictable in certain ways. They also tend to underestimate coordinated group tactics, since much of their training emphasizes individual skill over teamwork." "That could work in our favor," Damien said thoughtfully. "If we can coordinate our warriors effectively, rather than relying on individual strength alone." Over the following days, Elena found herself increasingly integrated into the pack's preparations, sharing insights on defensive strategies while carefully avoiding details too personal or painful to revisit. She trained alongside select warriors, demonstrating techniques that could help counter guild tactics, careful never to reveal more of her past than necessary. Marcus, notably, avoided her entirely during this time, embarrassment from their earlier confrontation still lingering beneath his usual confidence. It was Oliver who eventually approached her directly, curiosity overcoming caution. "You really took down Marcus and two of our best warriors without breaking a sweat," he said, watching her demonstrate a defensive maneuver to a group of younger fighters. "I have to admit, I didn't believe it until I saw how you move." "It wasn't about strength," Elena said, adjusting a warrior's stance carefully. "It's about efficiency, using minimal effort for maximum control." "Could you teach me that?" Oliver asked, genuine interest replacing his earlier skepticism. Elena studied him for a moment, considering. "If you're willing to unlearn some habits first," she said. "Wolves rely heavily on strength and speed naturally. Guild training focuses instead on precision, patience, and control. It requires a different mindset entirely." Oliver nodded eagerly, and over the following days, Elena found herself gradually accepted by more members of the pack, her expertise earning respect that had initially been withheld out of unfamiliarity and caution. Marcus finally approached her nearly a week after her arrival, finding her alone during a quiet moment in the estate's training yard. He stood awkwardly for a moment before speaking. "I owe you an apology," he said finally, the words clearly uncomfortable for him. "The way I treated you at the diner was inexcusable." Elena studied him carefully, weighing his sincerity. "Apology accepted," she said simply, "though actions matter more than words going forward." Marcus nodded, some of his usual arrogance returning, though tempered now by genuine humility. "I'd like to help prepare against this remnant threat," he said, "if you're willing to work with me, despite everything." Elena considered his offer carefully, before nodding once. "Everyone's effort will matter, if this threat is as serious as we believe," she said. "I'm willing to set aside what happened, provided you're genuinely committed to doing better." "I am," Marcus said firmly, and for the first time since their initial confrontation, Elena sensed genuine sincerity behind his words. rather than mere self-preservation. As days passed, preparations within the pack intensified, warriors training rigorously under Elena's guidance, defensive strategies refined carefully based on her knowledge of guild tactics. Damien remained deeply involved throughout, his respect for Elena growing steadily alongside a curiosity he found increasingly difficult to ignore. One evening, after a particularly exhausting training session, Damien found Elena alone in the study, studying maps late into the night. He entered quietly, careful not to startle her. "You should rest," he said gently. "You've been working non-stop since you arrived." Elena glanced up, exhaustion evident in her expression despite her attempt to hide it. "There's too much at stake to rest properly," she said. Damien moved closer, studying the maps she had been analyzing. "You're carrying this entire threat alone in your mind," he observed. "You don't have to. That's precisely why you're here now, working alongside us, rather than facing this by yourself." Elena looked up at him, something softening slightly in her guarded expression. "Old habits," she admitted quietly. "Trusting others with responsibilities like this doesn't come naturally to me anymore." "Perhaps it's time that changed," Damien said quietly, his gaze steady, sincere. For a brief moment, something passed silently between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of trust, slowly building, despite years of caution and isolation on Elena's part. Neither spoke further of it that evening, but both understood, in that quiet exchange, that whatever alliance had begun between them was steadily becoming something more significant, something neither had fully anticipated when this entire situation began. Outside, unseen by either of them, shadows moved carefully along the estate's perimeter, patient eyes watching closely, waiting for the right moment to strike. The attack came without warning, exactly as Elena had feared it might. It was late afternoon, the diner half full with its usual crowd of regulars, when the first sign of trouble arrived, in the form of a delivery truck parking awkwardly outside, its driver taking far too long to step out of the vehicle. Elena noticed the delay immediately, old instincts sharpening as she studied the truck through the front window while pouring coffee for a customer. Something about the driver's posture, the careful way he scanned the parking lot before finally emerging, set alarm bells ringing in her mind. She caught Lucy's eye briefly, gesturing subtly toward the back exit. "Get everyone toward the kitchen," she said quietly, her voice calm but urgent. "Now." Lucy, trusting Elena's instincts without question after everything she had come to understand over recent days, moved quickly, guiding confused customers gently but firmly toward the back of the diner. Grace, sensing the shift in atmosphere immediately, began ushering people through the kitchen without hesitation, years of quiet trust in Elena's judgment overriding any need for explanation. Elena moved toward the front entrance just as the driver, followed by two additional men, emerging from the truck's cargo area, approached the diner with deliberate, measured steps. She recognized their posture instantly, the same careful discipline she had once carried herself, confirming her worst suspicions. "Elena Ward," the lead man said calmly as he entered, his eyes scanning the mostly empty diner. "It's time you came with us." "I'm not going anywhere," Elena said evenly, positioning herself between the intruders and the kitchen, where Grace and the remaining customers had gathered. "That wasn't a request," the man said, his tone hardening slightly. "The remnant requires your skills. You can join willingly, or we can persuade you otherwise." Elena studied the three men carefully, assessing their stances, searching for weaknesses in their formation. "You're outnumbered," she said calmly. "Reinforcements are already on their way." It was a bluff, though a calculated one. She had already sent a brief message to Damien the moment she noticed the truck, trusting that pack warriors would arrive quickly if needed. Still, she understood she might need to hold her ground alone for several crucial minutes. The lead man smiled thinly, unimpressed. "We're aware of your new alliance with the wolves," he said. "That's precisely why we're moving now, before that alliance grows any stronger." Without further warning, the three men advanced together, coordinated in a way that confirmed Elena's earlier assessment of guild training limitations. Precise, but overly reliant on predictable patterns, rather than adaptive improvisation. Elena met their advance calmly, drawing on years of ingrained discipline to counter their movements one by one. She used the confined space of the diner to her advantage, guiding their attacks into tables and chairs, disrupting their coordination through careful use of the environment around her. The first man lunged toward her directly, and she redirected his momentum smoothly into an overturned table, sending dishes and cutlery scattering loudly across the floor. The second attempted to flank her from the side, but she anticipated the movement, using a nearby chair to block his path, just long enough to counter effectively, leaving him disoriented and off balance. The lead man, more cautious than his companions, hung back initially, observing her technique carefully, before finally engaging directly himself. Their exchange was swift, controlled, each movement calculated precisely, testing weaknesses methodically, rather than relying on brute force alone. Elena held her ground, drawing on discipline honed through years of rigorous training, refusing to be pushed backward toward the kitchen, where Grace and the customers remained hidden. Just as the confrontation reached its most intense point, the diner's front door burst open, and Damien arrived with Oliver and several additional warriors close behind him. The sudden arrival of reinforcements shifted the balance of the confrontation immediately. Recognizing they were now significantly outnumbered, the three remnant operatives disengaged quickly, retreating toward their truck with practiced efficiency, rather than risking further confrontation against unfavorable odds. "This isn't finished," the lead man called back as they retreated. "The remnant doesn't give up easily." Damien moved quickly to Elena's side as the truck sped away, concern evident in his expression, despite his usual composed demeanor. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "I'm fine," Elena said, though her breathing remained slightly elevated from the exertion of the confrontation. "They wanted to take me, not harm me. That's their priority for now." Grace emerged cautiously from the kitchen, relief flooding her expression as she saw the immediate danger had passed. "What on earth was that?" she asked, glancing nervously between Elena and Damien. "I'll explain everything," Elena said gently, "but not here. It's not safe for you or the customers to know too much right now." Grace studied her for a long moment, clearly troubled, but trusting Elena's judgment, despite the unanswered questions clearly weighing on her mind. "Just promise me you're not in danger you can't handle," she said finally. "I promise I'm doing everything I can to keep everyone safe," Elena said sincerely, though privately she understood the danger had only just begun to reveal itself fully. Later that evening, back at the estate, Damien called an urgent meeting among his senior warriors. Elena present alongside Chloe, Oliver, and Marcus, all gathered around the large table in the study. "They moved faster than we anticipated," Damien said grimly. "This confirms the threat is both organized and immediate." "They wanted me specifically," Elena said, "which means they'll likely try again, probably with greater numbers next time." "We need better coordination," Marcus said, surprising everyone slightly with his serious tone, humility replacing his earlier arrogance entirely. "If Elena's teachings have shown us anything, it's that predictable patterns can be exploited. We need to think several steps ahead of them." Damien nodded in agreement, studying the maps spread across the table thoughtfully. "We'll need to anticipate their next move carefully," he said. "Elena, based on what you witnessed today, what can you tell us about their likely strategy going forward?" Elena considered the question seriously, drawing on both her training and her first-hand observation of the operatives' tactics. "They'll regroup and gather additional numbers," she said. "Given their urgency, I'd expect their next attempt within days rather than weeks. They'll likely target somewhere less public than the diner, somewhere they believe offers a tactical advantage." "Which means they may target the estate directly," Oliver said grimly. "Possibly," Elena agreed. "We need to prepare accordingly. Reinforcing defenses and ensuring coordinated response strategies are firmly in place before they make their next move." As the meeting continued late into the night, strategies forming steadily around the table, Elena found herself increasingly aware of Damien's presence beside her, his steady calm a quiet source of reassurance amid the mounting tension. Whatever alliance had begun cautiously between them was rapidly deepening into something far more significant, forged now not just through shared strategy, but through genuine trust built under the pressure of real, immediate danger. Outside, beyond the estate's carefully guarded perimeter, the remnant continued their preparations quietly, patient and methodical, gathering strength for a confrontation that both sides now understood was rapidly becoming inevitable. 4 days after the confrontation at the diner, warning came through Chloe's network of contacts that the remnant had gathered significant numbers at an abandoned property just beyond the northern edge of Blackthorn territory. Adam Reeves, true to his earlier promise, reached out once more, providing Elena with details about the group's plans. confirming their intention to strike directly at the estate within the coming night. "They're bringing everyone they have," Adam warned during a brief, tense phone call. "This isn't a small operation anymore. They see this as their chance to make a definitive statement." Elena relayed the information immediately to Damien, and preparations within the estate shifted into urgent, focused motion. Warriors were positioned strategically throughout the grounds, defensive formations arranged carefully based on Elena's understanding of guild tactics, every advantage considered and planned for meticulously. As night fell, tension settled heavily over the estate, warriors standing quiet and alert in their designated positions, weapons and training ready, should the threat arrive as predicted. Elena stood beside Damien, near the estate's main entrance, both scanning the darkness beyond the perimeter with careful, practiced attention. "Are you ready for this?" Damien asked quietly, glancing toward her. "As ready as I'll ever be," Elena replied, steadying her breathing despite the tension coiling tightly within her chest. Marcus approached from nearby, positioned with a group of warriors along the estate's eastern boundary. "Perimeter's secure," he reported. "No signs of movement yet." "They'll come," Elena said quietly. "Guild operatives prefer striking during the deepest hours of night, when defenses are typically weakest." As if confirming her words precisely, the first indication of movement appeared near the tree line beyond the estate's northern boundary, shadows shifting subtly among the darkness. Damien signaled quietly, warriors shifting into readiness without unnecessary noise or commotion. The remnant emerged from the darkness in coordinated formation, moving swiftly and silently across the open ground toward the estate's defenses. Elena counted quickly, estimating nearly 20 operatives advancing steadily, considerably more than the small group encountered previously at the diner. "Hold positions," Damien commanded quietly, warriors tensing in readiness as the remnant drew closer. The confrontation began abruptly, operatives clashing directly with pack warriors along the estate's northern boundary, coordinated movements meeting fierce, disciplined resistance. Elena moved quickly into the fray herself, her training guiding every motion with practiced precision, countering operatives who displayed the same disciplined patterns she recognized instantly from her own past training. Damien fought alongside her, his strength and speed complementing her precision perfectly, each covering vulnerabilities the other might otherwise expose. Marcus, positioned nearby, fought with renewed determination, his earlier humility transformed now into genuine, focused resolve, eager to prove his commitment to protecting those he had once dismissed so carelessly. The confrontation stretched onward, intense and demanding, both sides testing each other's limits repeatedly. Elena noticed quickly that the remnant's numbers, while significant, lacked the coordinated teamwork she had warned Damien about earlier. Individual operatives fighting skillfully but without the cohesive strategy that pack warriors, trained carefully under her guidance, now demonstrated clearly. Slowly, steadily, the balance of the confrontation began shifting favorably toward the estate's defenders, coordinated teamwork gradually overwhelming the remnant's individually skilled but poorly synchronized operatives. Elena and Damien moved together seamlessly, anticipating each other's movements instinctively, their combined efforts proving especially effective against operatives attempting to exploit gaps in the estate's defenses. Near the height of the confrontation, Elena found herself facing the lead operative from the earlier diner confrontation directly, his expression grim and determined as he recognized her clearly amid the chaos. "You could have joined us willingly," he said, circling carefully. "Instead, you chose to stand against your own kind." "These wolves aren't my enemy," Elena replied evenly, meeting his cautious advance with practiced calm. "The remnant's methods are exactly what led to the guild's destruction in the first place." "Then you'll share their fate," the operative said, launching a swift, precise attack. Elena met his assault confidently, drawing on years of training now fully reawakened, countering each movement carefully, refusing to yield ground despite his skill. Their exchange grew intense, each testing the other's limits, until finally Elena found the opening she needed, redirecting his final attack cleanly, leaving him disarmed and disoriented on the ground before her. "Stand down," she said firmly, standing over him now, her voice steady and clear. "This ends now." Recognizing defeat, the operative slowly raised his hands in surrender, understanding clearly the confrontation had turned decisively against the remnant's favor. Around them, similar scenes played out as remaining operatives, seeing their coordinated assault crumbling steadily, began retreating hastily into the darkness beyond the estate's boundaries. Damien arrived at Elena's side moments later, breathing heavily from exertion, but otherwise unharmed, relief evident in his expression, as he surveyed the aftermath of the confrontation. "It's over," he said quietly, though caution remained clear in his tone. "For now, at least." Elena nodded, exhaustion settling heavily upon her now that immediate danger had passed. "They'll regroup eventually," she said. "But tonight, they've learned clearly that this territory won't be an easy target." Marcus approached, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and quiet pride. "We held them off completely," he said, genuine relief evident in his voice. "Your training made all the difference tonight, Elena. I owe you more gratitude than words can properly convey." "We all worked together," Elena said, offering him a small, genuine smile. "That's precisely what made tonight's victory possible." As dawn approached, warriors began the careful process of securing the estate fully, ensuring no remaining threats lingered nearby. Elena stood quietly near the estate's entrance, watching the sky slowly lighten with the first hints of morning, exhaustion and relief mingling within her in equal measure. Damien joined her quietly, standing close beside her as they both watched the sunrise together, in comfortable, exhausted silence. "You saved countless lives tonight," he said softly, "mine included." Elena glanced toward him, something warm and unfamiliar stirring gently within her chest, an emotion she had long since taught herself to suppress carefully. "We saved each other," she said quietly. "That's how alliances are supposed to work, isn't it?" Damien studied her closely. Something deeper than gratitude reflected clearly in his gaze now. "Perhaps," he said gently, "it's become something more than simply an alliance." Elena did not answer immediately, though she did not look away either, understanding clearly that whatever had begun cautiously between them was steadily becoming undeniable, deepening naturally amid shared danger and hard-earned trust. As the sun rose fully above the horizon, casting warm golden light across the quiet, exhausted estate, both of them understood clearly that whatever challenges remained ahead, they would face them now, together. A week passed after the confrontation at the estate, and the territory slowly settled back into its familiar rhythms, though nothing about Elena's life remained quite as it had been before. Word had reached Chloe's contacts that the remnant, having suffered a decisive setback, had scattered significantly, its remaining leadership scrambling to regroup somewhere far beyond Blackthorn territory. Adam Reeves confirmed as much during a brief call, his relief evident even through the phone. "They won't forget this defeat easily," he said, "but you've bought yourself real time, Elena, perhaps even more than that." "Thank you for the warning," Elena said sincerely. "Without it, tonight could have ended very differently." "Take care of yourself," Adam replied. "And Elena, for what it's worth, I think you made the right choice, standing with the wolves rather than against them." After ending the call, Elena stood quietly for a long moment, absorbing the reality that the immediate danger threatening her fragile peace had finally passed. She thought of Grace, still curious but patient, waiting for explanations Elena now felt ready to offer carefully. She thought of Lucy, whose unwavering trust throughout the entire ordeal had meant more to her than she had properly expressed. She returned to the diner later that day, greeted warmly by both Grace and Lucy, who listened carefully, as Elena explained, as much as she felt comfortable revealing, about her past and the recent danger that had briefly threatened their quiet town. "You could have told us sooner," Grace said gently, though there was no anger in her tone, only genuine concern. "We would have understood." "I know," Elena said. "I just wanted to protect the life I built here for as long as possible." "Well," Lucy said, offering a warm, reassuring smile, "that life isn't going anywhere. You're still the same Elena we've always known, just with a few more secrets than we realized." Elena smiled genuinely, gratitude washing over her at their easy acceptance. She returned to her usual duties at the diner over the following days, finding comfort once more in the familiar routine, though her connection to the Blackthorn pack remained strong, deepening steadily rather than fading, now that immediate danger had passed. Damien visited the diner regularly during this time, no longer needing pretenses or urgent discussions to justify his presence. Their conversations grew easier, more natural, filled increasingly with quiet laughter and genuine warmth, rather than the careful caution that had once defined their interactions. Marcus, too, visited occasionally, his earlier arrogance replaced entirely now by genuine respect and quiet camaraderie. "The pack owes you a debt we can never fully repay," he told her one afternoon, watching as she demonstrated a defensive technique to a group of younger warriors who had begun regularly seeking her guidance. "You've more than made up for it already," Elena replied warmly, "through everything you've done since that first confrontation." One evening, several weeks after the battle at the estate, Damien invited Elena to join him for a quiet walk through the grounds surrounding his territory, away from the demands of daily responsibilities and lingering threats. They walked slowly together, beneath a clear evening sky, comfortable silence settling naturally between them. "I've been thinking," Damien said eventually, breaking the quiet gently, "about what you said the night of the battle, about alliances." Elena glanced toward him curiously. "What about it?" "I think you were right," he said. "It has become something more than simply an alliance, at least for me." Elena felt warmth spread gently through her chest at his words, an emotion she had spent years carefully guarding against, now surfacing naturally, undeniably. "For me as well," she admitted quietly. Damien stopped walking, turning fully to face her, his expression open and sincere, in a way she had rarely seen from him before. "I'd like to offer you a permanent place within this territory," he said. "Not simply as an ally or advisor, but as someone essential to this pack's future, someone I hope will choose to remain here by my side, for reasons far beyond mutual protection alone." Elena studied him carefully, weighing his words seriously, understanding clearly the significance behind his offer. She thought of the quiet life she had built here, the friendships she had formed, the unexpected sense of belonging she had discovered, despite years of careful isolation. "I'd like that," she said finally, her voice steady, genuine warmth reflected clearly in her expression. "More than I expected to, if I'm honest." Damien's expression softened into something close to genuine happiness, rare and unguarded. "Then perhaps," he said gently, "this is the beginning of something neither of us anticipated when this all began." Elena smiled, reaching out to take his hand gently, the gesture simple, yet deeply significant, given everything they had faced together. "Perhaps it is," she agreed softly. Together, they continued their walk beneath the darkening sky, the quiet town and territory around them settling peacefully into evening, unaware of how significantly their world had shifted in recent weeks. Elena Cross, once simply a waitress hiding carefully from her past, had found not only safety and belonging within Blackthorn territory, but something far more precious, a genuine connection, built through hardship, trust, and mutual respect. As they walked quietly onward, the future ahead remained uncertain, challenges and threats undoubtedly still waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. But for the first time in longer than she could clearly remember, Elena faced that uncertain future without fear, standing confidently beside someone she trusted completely, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together, side by side. And somewhere deep within her, the careful walls she had built for so long finally settled into something new, no longer defensive barriers meant purely for survival, but the quiet foundation of a life she had never truly believed she deserved, until now.